I'm Marilyn Zavorski from the Stow Historical Society. Susan Crane asked me if I would do this presentation. In 2015, the Historical Society was contacted by a young WBZ radio sports writer. And he was just out of college, and he was just trying to find something really cool. And he came across Mapledale Golf Course. And he said, can we work together between WBZ and the Historical Society and do a program for Black History Week, or month? And I said, why not? I didn't know very much about it. So he had already started digging in the Boston Globe, and so here we go. So these are some of the resources that I used recently. This book here, Hidden Fairways. I have it in the back, but I was going to set it up. But being a teacher, you always have all your props. So if anyone wants to look at it, I have it. And the sources all mention Mapledale, even if it's just a paragraph. It's absolutely amazing how important this little golf course ended up being in the history of the black golf courses. You have to remember, in 1920, this was the golden age of sports. And that meant the Caucasians were really into it. You had Whalen Park, you had all sorts of things. But the African Americans were not welcome. And because this was the Jim Crow era, and so the blacks were trying to create their own social and cultural centers. And one of the ways to do this was to have their own little golf courses. And this was for everything. They would have dances, they would have all sorts of programs, so that they would be able to have more of an equal opportunity compared to what the Caucasians were having. This is John M. Shippen, and I included him because he, even though I'm not going to talk about him today, was very important in Mapledale in getting black players to come. And he was actually the first African-American professional golfer. And that's 1896, which is absolutely incredible. The very first African-American golf course has been credited to Shady Breast Country Club in Westfield, New Jersey. This was a white golf course. It was called Westfield Golf Course. And a group of black entrepreneurs bought it, and they turned it into a black country club. So that was really very interesting compared to Mapledale. And what is really cool about this place is that in the summer, Shady Rest, the golf club, was a part of the National Register of Historic Places. It's something we can think about for Stow, too. So here we have Mapledale. It's the earliest African-American golf course designed and developed privately on purchased land, which is interesting in the fact that Robert H. Hawkins, it was his dream, his reality, and he wanted to have a golf course. And he started with land. He didn't start with a golf course. He built it. 9 holes, but he got it. And it was known as the United Golfers Incorporated. And the first 3 consecutive national golf tournaments for Negroes were at Mapledale in the United States. And because of this venture, Robert H. Hawkins is known as the father of Negro golf. And that is how it is written. In order to pull this off, because Braden and WBZ Radio was laid off. So here we had all this material. We hadn't talked to Stow Acres yet. So I just kept right on going. I said, let's see how much I can gather. So it's through newspaper articles, Ancestry.com, the Stow Town Vault, the South Middlesex Registry of Deeds, and many published books, magazines, and things online. The black culture had their own newspapers, and two of the prominent ones is the Pittsburgh Courier and the Chicago Defender. And people around the country would subscribe to these, and they would be mailed to them, and they would know what is happening in the United States and in their area. But then we had the Boston Globe. Son of a gun, we have a Boston paper, August 5th, 1926, and the headline is, Golf Course in Stow for Colored People, believed to be the only one of its kind. Since 1926, we know that we had Shady Rest, but in 1926, this is what Boston knew. And what is interesting, this is August 5th, but in Baltimore, the Baltimore Afro-American, 2 months earlier, was talking about what was going to happen in Stow before the Boston Globe even. So they were on it. They were on it. And they mentioned Barbara Hawkins and the other players that were going to be coming. So Mapledale Country Club, the land with buildings was bought and developed in Stow, February 1926. And majority of these pictures that you're going to see here, these are glass plates that we have in the vault. And it's the reverse image, so it's really interesting to try to print them out. Who was Robert H. Hawkins? Well, Ancestry really quickly find that he was born son of a coachman in 1888. He, from a very young age, would be caddying. Blacks at this time would only be caddies. At the Forest Park Club in Adams, where he was born. He moved to Burlington, Vermont after his mother died, he and his father, and where he attended this is things for high school. And then he also was caddying at the I could say this a moment ago, Wanakee Club, and this is, sorry. Yeah, let's see there. There we go. And this is a poor picture. I mean, it's as best you can get it, but that's the club in Burlington, Vermont. After he graduated, he couldn't make any money this way, so he changed over and he became steward of the country club so he could make money so he could live. This is just for a fun little thing. The National Archives, which you get on Ancestry, you can get draft registrations and all that. And so this verifies the information. And he's 29 years old. He owns a bowling alley in Billards. He's his own boss. But the question was, does he have to support anyone? And he said, yes, my father solely, except for his care of 2 lawns. It just, his father was out there mowing lawns, and that wasn't his job, that was his father's. But other than that, he's taking care of his father. I have a bundle of the National Archives, the census, and this is Stow, and this is 1930. It just shows where he is. He's still saying he owns the golf course. It's worth $10,000, and he and his wife are there. We also, in the vault, have the Stow tax records. And so I only put his down. I could have put the golf course, but just so you could see the ink has faded a lot. It was a real challenge to take these pictures, and they had to piece them together. but he was paying taxes in Stow. Another way of finding out people is the Stow directory, and he is way down here at the bottom, Hawkins, and they have him at the Mapledale Country Club. Looking for a picture. We don't have pictures of people, and you just keep searching and searching. If you have a subscription, you can get historic newspapers from all over the United States. I don't have it. I have Ancestry, but I can't have everything. And I found that it said that there's one in February, you can Google it, and every time it comes up a different page, so you never know, so you have to keep doing it over and over and over, hoping that maybe the page that you want shows up. Son of a gun, there it is. I took a screenshot, and it's about that big, and we kept putting it through Photoshop and playing with it all over and over, and that's the best we got it. So it's pretty darn good. I'm really happy with this, because he is supposed to be a stocky fellow. You can see he is. He's supposed to be a very jovial, happy person. And there's his sweet wife, Edith, and this is in 1952. That doesn't help us about the land. In order to understand the land, you have to go down to the South Middlesex Registry of Deeds, which is a trip in itself. Just parking. And Tom and I parked on the road, and it only took 8 quarters, and so we kept having to go back, and feed it, because it only took so many quarters at a time. The reason why you have to go is because this is in the 20s. Anything 50s below, maybe 60s below, hasn't been indexed, because Middlesex County is the area where all the original documents were. Everyone lived in this area, closer to Boston than here. And it's not indexed. If you were in Worcester County, you could just go right through it and get all of it. So when you go in, you have to go up to the 3rd floor, and we have this. It's really interesting. This side here is the court. This is the registry on the other side. And they have the whole 3rd floor is indexes. And you have to go through it. And I started writing it down. I said, wait a minute. I have a camera with me. I have my phone. And you just took picture after picture after picture of this, because you're looking for numbers. If you have the docket of the number and the page, then you can go home and look them up. So it turned out to be very worthwhile, all of that. And this is what we found. There were 25 transactions in less than 4 years. Because what a lot of these people do is they don't use banks. They use their friends, and they're borrowing money. And so when you go through all of these, your head's spinning, because they keep, it looks like he's not owning it, because he signs it over to his friend because his friend's giving him some mortgage money, back and forth and back and forth. And this was in 2015. It was Bob Walrath that helped me sort of unravel this. Being an attorney, he understood this, so I had a lot to learn, but it was totally, totally fascinating. I have all these. If anyone wants them, we can get them printed out, because they're all in PDFs. This is the very first transaction, February 27th, 1926. He paid $10,000, and it included, this is the Randall farm, livestock, poultry, crops, hay in the barn, furniture, wagons, farming implements, and there's also had been a range. It did not include the range and a machine, and furniture that belonged to Ray L. I can't remember. Brooks, thank you. I only can see the B in this angle. So he was probably like the caretaker there at that point. And that was February 1926. This is the first article that went with the headline. And it is a fabulous article, but we're not going to read it. We can get it printed out if you want to see it. So I summarized it because it's long. It's too many words. What it said was that 190 acres, 18-room mansion, dancing room, guest rooms, men's locker room in a separate building. There's going to be a 9-hole golf course, which was laid out by Ralph Thomas from Sandy Brook Country Club. That's in Wayland. And the links were going to be extended in the following year. And they're going to have facilities for horseback riding, tennis, trap and gallery shooting, croquet, quoits, and winter sports. And this is an undated picture from the vault. It is not a glass negative. We have no idea. It's an old picture. That's all we can tell you. At the same time, he's being very creative, and he is putting out advertisements that people can come and just use the facilities. They don't have to be golfing. Come. So we have Knights Templars coming out of Boston. And then down here we have the Observatory Hill Businessmen's Association. And this is going to be the second year that they've come, this following year. So he is doing everything he can to get money coming in to this. And then they had the official opening. It was in 2027. And it's fun here that they're dedicating the new dance hall, which is the big building, the big room that they have, but they probably put a new floor in. And I don't know what that all entails. Then they had the tournament, and what was interesting at this one, there were 60 entries, and they came as far as New Orleans and Atlanta, Georgia. Now this is where you have to remember this is the Jim Crow era. And these people are all traveling by car. And there are stories that people in Stow would see the African Americans arriving in a convoy of, a section of cars. And the more I thought about it, I said, of course, it's for their safety. It's for their safety. Even up north, there is discrimination up here, and especially if they're coming from the south, they have to come all the way up. And numbers are very, very, very important to them for their safety. Okay, and this is the same tournament, but I did this because it showed that we have Bob Hawkins, who was first the president. He's now taken the job as vice president. And so they're changing just like you did today. They voted new people in, but everyone's still there. Negro golfers to meet pros September 2nd, and this is 1928. And this is really very interesting. The match will be the first time in history of golf that local fans will have the opportunity to see two of New England's finest golfers match against two crack Negro players. And this was unheard of. And they were opening it up here in Stow so that people could come and watch. And what is very interesting, I have this book in the back. This book is just wonderful. And he talked, Sinnott, talked about this one tournament, and the prize money was $300 was awarded. The top professional received $100. You have to remember the year, and we're also talking about African Americans. At the conclusion of the event, there's an elaborate program and dinner dance. and prizes were awarded for the longest drive. This is not a golf drive. This is the drive in your car. It's just like when you go to a reunion, high school or college, and someone gets a prize for coming the furthest or the closest, or they have all sorts of things. This is what this was talking about. The best dressed golfer. Now, I know you have to remember they dressed nicely. They had every single picture I've seen, not at Mapledale, but at other, at this era, they all were dressed nicely. So you had the best one and the owner of the best looking golf clubs. All right. And then in 1928, and this was the final tournament held at Mapledale, and what was interesting, this is the era when they spelled Stow with the E. You see a lot of our town documents. All of a sudden, there's an E on it, and then it disappears. In Porter, Washington, we had a pro here, and he was the top. He was the winner in this one. However, right after this, 1921, Hawkins was a disillusioned man. He spent $25,000 of his personal funds. Imagine this is 1920, the 20s. That's a monster amount of money. And he borrowed an additional $5,000 to keep the club alive. Mapledale Club at Stow will no longer be a resort. He wrote part of this letter and sent it. It was sent down here, you can sort of see it, to the Pittsburgh Courier, saying, that's it, we can't do this. And so he gave it up, and this was the first mortgage. He had 2 big mortgages going. So this is the first one as it's collapsing. Then we have the Stow paper getting involved in this because we have the sale of the real estate. It was October 6th, selling at public auction for $5,000. Think about what he put into that. Think what he put into it. And it was advertised in the Stow News Enterprise on the 12th, 19th, and 26th. This is what it was to sell this. And here, when you go to the registry and you're taking the pictures of all these, you see the number. This is the book number and the page number. And you go online and you just plug those in and everything pops up for you. And you can research it. So what was for sale? 2 horses, 4 cows, and 2 calves. All poultry, crops, hay in the barn, wagons, and farm implements. All furnaces, heaters, ranges, mantles, gas and electric fixtures, screens, screen doors, awnings, all furniture, linen and furnishings, dishes, accepting and reserving 1 piano, 1 radio set, and all linen which belonged to my wife. However, any personal property lease which may be held by the Hawkins Furniture Company, you have to work with that. And last name was Oliver Briggs had the lease on the pool table. Then a little bit later, in the Boston Globe, on page 8, there was a long column of all the people who were filing for bankruptcy. And that's why it's a little bit blurry, because it was so small. And it was, if I kept it that small, you wouldn't be able to read it. So it just shows that, he had to file for bankruptcy. He had nothing left. And so he's a laborer, so he's back just working, just trying to make a living. Here's the second mortgage. So what is interesting, a lot of these people, we have Celia Mayer, who bought the property, and she immediately sold it to Grace Sweeter. And he just went through all these things. It's crazy. And who sold it to Charles M. Cox. And then he is the one who developed Stow Acres Country Club. And this is one of the glass plates right here. You saw that before. Here's another one. You can see Stow. You can see the main building right here. And here's a building right here, which is obviously not there. You can see part of a car. That's part of the dance hall. And there's several pianos. Here's a little eating area. Here's outside. This is the corner. The corner's still there. Oops, sorry. This man right here is Cox. This might be his son right there. Don't know. And this is, you can see part of the building right here. So this is like a little putting green. And I'm sure it was totally staged. Maybe not. So I kept just putting this name in. And son of a gun, in 1941, another story popped up. And this is, they're now in Canton, Massachusetts, and it's the 16th annual Negro National Golf Tournament. The first 3 were in Stow, and now they have 150 players coming from all over the United States. And it's a fun little article, but you don't need it. They couldn't play. It was raining so hard people couldn't see anything. And some of the players wanted to go out anyhow. And then, very seldom do we see a picture in the newspaper of black players, so they had the neat little picture, so I add that. They had this little teeny bottom court, and it said, Porter Washington, the local Negro pro who played in the first championship at Stow in 1926. He was in the lead, and he was in the clubhouse with Walter Speedy of Chicago, and he had a big thing to do with Mapledale. And Walter Speedy said it was Bob Hawkins' idea. He kept writing me in Chicago about a tournament, and finally I agreed to bring some players to Mapledale for my club in Chicago. 7 came with me. There were 31 players at Mapledale in 1926. And then it goes on, there's contradictions about who named the organization in the United Golf Association and sponsoring, and there's still back and forth on that one. So this was a nice confirmation that we know what the players thought. So these stories are from Shady Rest and from Mapledale. As I mentioned, had noted that the cars were arriving in caravans. This happened in New Jersey, and the more I thought about it, it just made so much sense. Because in 1938, Victor Green published the first, the Negro Motorist Green Book, because the last name was Green. And it told them where to buy gas, where to stop to eat, where you could stay overnight. And it went across the country. It's just like when I was a kid, we had the AAA, the triptychs and all that. It guided us. This was their guide. And it was in use until the 60s, showing them how to navigate through the maze of the United States. So the Mapledale, from just the news articles, people were coming from New Jersey, New York, Chicago, Worcester. That's more the northern side. From deep south, you have Washington, D.C., Baltimore, places in North Carolina, New Orleans, Virginia, Georgia, and then that's the end, because that's where later on, when it was at other places, it was across the country. And so these people needed assistance in getting, that's why they had the Green Book, which would have come in later on. These people did not have it, but afterwards they would. There's a wonderful, wonderful exhibit. This is the National Park Service using the Green Book. And we don't think about the discrimination up here, but it was very subtle. It was very, very subtle. I can't talk about Stow. I grew up outside Detroit, and I know it was very, very subtle. We saw it all the time when we would go in, where the African Americans stood, where they sat, where they were on the bus, the whole thing. There was always, they were in their place. We have, Jonathan and I have already done one for Black History month. We did a video, and it's on YouTube. The Amateur Golf has another wonderful video about it. Freedom's Way has a very nice story about this. And then you have the Smithsonian Institute. And this is just, you got to preview this real fast. This is some of the sources. I'm sure I missed some. And it's not MLA. Everything else is all documented, but I just never got them in order. So that's it. We have an incredible treasure here in Stow. The more I researched it, the more I said, oh my gosh, look what we have. When you take writings from professors from all over the country, and you look in the index and you see Stow and Mapledale, they're talking about it. And Mapledale made a very big impact. So it's something to think about as, I know there's other groups who are thinking about it. The Conservation Commission is going to name the trail around outside the perimeters of the South Course. It's going to be the Mapledale Trail. There's plans, Bob McDonald is working on trying to get a granite and a sign for it. It's a plaque. It's copper. It's really nice. And it's all in research right now. So, and that is really nice. And there's a group of people who are also very interested. I think it's on the 17th of November. They're going to have a program at the library trying to get more people interested in this, and some of in the younger families, how can we teach these kids, how can we work with the families? And I had brought some books, but that's okay. for younger kids, there's some really cool literature, children's literature coming out now. And it's something that some people might even want to think about, write a Mapledale story. I'm not up to it right now. So, you've had a long afternoon, so I thank you for staying and listening. And Jonathan has this videotaped, so you can always watch it again. So let's have a big hand for Marilyn.